Welcome all to my paranormal closet where the stories and magic take place. My guest today has been fascinated by all things paranormal since childhood, beginning with a UFO encounter he had at 4 years old. Because of that experience, his life's passion has been to research, investigate, write, and share extraterrestrial encounters from everyday people in a way that conveys the human element of profoundly strange encounters. Please join me in welcoming author, ufologist, and paranormal researcher Nomar Slevik. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So you had a UFO encounter when you were 4 years old.
I did, yeah. You want me to get into it a little bit here?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So, I had fallen asleep, and a loud bang woke me up in the middle of the night. And being 4 years old, the middle of the night, I don't know if that's like 10 p.m. or like 3 a.m. Like I didn't know. But my eyes kind of popped open, and I just had no idea what it was, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I was kind of looking around the room and listening to see if I could figure out what it was. And then I start hearing these little light taps on the window. And I'm like, oh, that's rain. It's a thunder and lightning storm. That must have been thunder that woke me up. So I sat up in my bed to look out the window. And at the time, I lived at the tip of Maine, bordering Canada. You can look across my window, look out my window and see Canada. If I was outside, I could throw a rock and almost hit Canada. That's how close I was. And between my house and Canada was the St. John River. And I'm looking out the window and I can see the river, and it's kind of raging pretty good because there's a storm going on, and the sky's lighting up, and I can see the little things of electricity, lightning going off, and I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. So I'm kind of kneeling up on my bed watching everything. And after a moment, I'm not really sure how long, there was this really it's hard to explain, but like this really obscene lightning bolt got stuck in the sky. Like if I were to ask you to draw a lightning bolt, you would draw like this jagged yellow line, or like the charging indicator on your smartphone. That's what it looked like. That's what my memory tells me, is that it looked like a lightning bolt, and it got stuck in the sky or in a cloud or something. And there was electricity coming off of it, and there was booms associated with it. And then I'm not sure what happened next. I guess I fell asleep, because the next thing I know, I woke up in the morning and didn't have my bearings about me. I just knew that I had to go to the bathroom. So I got up, went to the bathroom, and when I was done, walking from the bathroom back to my room, I can see out my bedroom window, and the lightning bolt was still there.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, that's crazy. And again, I'm 4 years old, so who knows what
Sure.
I'm really thinking. But I remember being really excited that it was still there, and it was kind of all coming back to me. So I ran downstairs and I got my dad and I brought him upstairs. Why we didn't go outside, I don't know, 4-year-old logic. But I brought him upstairs to look out my window, and it was gone. So
Ah.
I know. So I tried explaining to him what it was, and I was telling him about the storm the night before, and I must have been
Mm-hmm.
really excited, because at first he was kind of like patting my head. He's like, yeah, okay, buddy. But I was kind of really going on about it. So he actually had to get down on my level and put his hands on my shoulders and was like, buddy, it didn't even rain last night. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. And
Uh-huh.
I guess I kind of dropped it. But then a couple of weeks later, uh, my mom woke me up in the middle of the night. Again, I don't know if that's 10 p.m. or like 3 a.m., but this is just a couple weeks later. She wakes me up, brings me downstairs, and starts dressing me in my winter clothes. This is like April in Maine, and you don't know if it's going to be sunny or snow. So I'm getting like winter coat on and all that stuff. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like half asleep. And I look over and I see my sister, and she's all like bundled up and ready to go outside already. And so my dad kind of scoops me up, and my mom grabs my sister's hands, and we all go outside onto our front lawn. And my head is just buried in my dad's like jacket and chest, because it's freezing. And he's like, buddy, you got to look up. You got to look up. And I finally like take my head out of his chest and I look up, and it's the first and only time I've seen the Northern Lights. And I think at such a young age, seeing that weird lightning bolt thing and then the Aurora Borealis 2 weeks later instilled in me at such a young age that weird stuff happens in the sky and I should probably pay attention. And it wasn't until I was like a teenager when I thought back about the lightning bolt. And I was like, that might have been the first time I ever experienced a UFO. In my young mind, I guess saw it as a lightning bolt, or, whatever the hell, our young minds do to process something we don't understand. But that's what happened. That was my first experience with the unknown, or the strange, if you will.
All right, so you say that was your first experience, which means
Yeah.
that you've had others since.
That's true. Yeah. It's really been a lifetime, and it's because I pursue it. Like, I don't think I'm special in any way. I don't think I've been chosen or anything. I don't feel as though I've ever been abducted or anything like that. But I'm just always looking up, so I notice things that maybe some other people wouldn't. So I'd say since 4 years old, I'm 45 now. So since 4 years old, I've probably seen, I think I'm up to like 16 UFOs I've seen in my lifetime. And that's a lot. And some of them, it could have been something else. When I say UFO, I quite literally mean the acronym, unidentified flying object, that has since become synonymous with extraterrestrial, which is a big reason why the government is using UAP as opposed to UFO, so that stigma isn't there. But anyway, so I've seen 16 of them, and I'd say maybe 10 of them could have been something else that I just couldn't identify in the moment. But there's a good 6 of them where I'm pretty sure I saw some sort of craft from another world, which sounds crazy to say, but
Did they
and
look the same, or did they look different? Because I know
they were all
that
different.
So many people's descriptions of the objects and beings as described by abductees that they encounter differ from each other. The shape, size, and all that.
Yeah. They definitely all differed from each other. I think there's only 2 of them that were daytime. And the 2 daytime ones, one was like a cylinder or cigar type shape, and it was silver. And then another time, and this was probably 5 years before the cylinder one, I saw a silver ball. It was quite obviously a ball, like a sphere. You could see the roundness to it, and again, it was silver, and almost like a Christmas ornament. And it was kind of interesting how I saw it. It was there, and then it wasn't. Uh, I was working a different job at the time, and I had a work vehicle, and I got out of my work vehicle and just haphazardly looked up, and I saw the silver ball hovering over the river that's in the town that I was in. And I was like, whoa, look at that. And I'm kind of walking past the vehicle now. I'm like, that's pretty crazy. I look back just to make sure I'm not going to run into something, while I'm walking. And I actually need to go to the other side of the vehicle. So I'm just turning to the other side of the vehicle now. And I look up again, and it's gone. And I didn't even almost realize it was gone. I was kind of staring in the sky at where it was. And then I'm like, oh, it's gone. That's crazy. Wow. And it was just quite obviously a silver ball. It was hovering, it was silent. And it was fairly high up there. It wasn't celestial high. It was, if there was a cloud cover, it would have been under the cloud cover. But it was pretty high up there though,
It's terrible when you can't get somebody else to be a witness to it. Like
I know.
when I saw one in my from where I live in my development, it was pretty empty and not too many houses when we first moved here. And I remember seeing something. This was in the daytime on the horizon, and thinking, I'm going crazy. Like, am I really seeing this? And I got on the phone and I called my neighbor and I said, look out your window and tell me if you see anything. And she was able to see the same thing I did, which was cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But when my kids we're out night swimming. My two daughters and their friend were out night swimming, and they come running in the house. Mom, we just saw a flying saucer. And of course, they're dragging my ass out there. And of course, by the time I get there, it's gone. And what I did with them was I brought them inside the house and I sat them each in different areas of the house, gave them paper and pencil and said, draw what you saw. So you got this four and a half year old drawing her interpretation of what she saw. And
Nice.
then the 8-year-olds, the two 8-year-olds, and the pictures were identical, which was crazy cool because it's like these kids either imagined in the mind the same thing or they actually all saw the same thing, you know?
And it would be harder to believe that they all imagined the same thing and didn't verbalize it to each other, you know, like.
Correct. And you're thinking this is a spontaneous moment and they all go, oh my God, let's go get mom. I mean, they didn't have enough time to sit there and coordinate their thoughts about what they were seeing. They just saw it and came running into the house. So, I mean, if they had a day to talk about it, then I would have said, but this was right in the moment of right after it happened, you know? So I tend to believe that they actually did all see the same thing.
Sure. What state was that in?
In New Jersey, in Sussex County.
Yeah. Wow. Very
And
cool.
we get a lot of stuff going on over here because I have a paranormal team and a lot of them like to UFO watch too. And one of my friends kind of lives up on the mountain and he's always catching something on his phone. Like he'll be out there and he'll see it and he'll be like, okay, and he'll get it out and he'll post it. He'll go, this is what I saw tonight. And when I was writing my first book, it was supposed to be just about ghost stories, local ghost stories that people were sharing with me, their encounters. And then I was getting all these people coming to me about their UFO encounters and their Bigfoot encounters. And I'm thinking, all right, so how am I going to get this into a ghost book? So I said it was Sussex County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena. This way I could get all those UFO stories and Bigfoot stories into that one book. And it was great because they were a large chapter to the book because so many people have seen things and have had encounters. And I do definitely believe it. I don't know if you saw recently in the last few days in the news, they had 911 call, like this whole neighborhood of people.
The Las Vegas stuff.
Yeah, kind of similar to like what happened in the Berkshires, where the whole town was experiencing something and calling 911 back in the 60s or 70s, was it? And here was this town in Las Vegas, and they were all calling 911, and everybody was coming out and saying, "This is what we saw." And even the cop cameras got something strange on the camera. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think this was just one huge fake thing, or do you think it actually happened?
Well, my thoughts have kind of changed as more things come out, which is fair. I think, you know, that's how thoughts should happen. You know, they change as you get more information. Sure. And I would say initially, I was like, I can't believe a story like this is being reported and getting out into the mainstream, where you're talking about 8 and 10 foot tall alien creatures running around. Like, that's crazy. That's stuff that I'm researching to write my book, and it's obscure and probably never been published before. And, you know, and it's a fascinating story that I want to retell, and hopefully I can find a witness and talk to them. But this is like a mainstream story. Now, then I understood that the news outlet that was reporting this is the one that George Knapp works for. And George Knapp is somebody that's been in the UFO, in ufology for decades, and he has since been has connected with Jeremy Corbell, and they do a podcast together called Weaponized. But George Knapp, he was the first guy to bring out Bob Lazar back when Bob Lazar was anonymous, you know, to begin with. All of that was George Knapp. Then Skinwalker Ranch, all of that was George Knapp and his other colleagues.
Oh, interesting.
In Bigelow. So the news station and George Knapp, all while doing this UFO stuff, is also an investigative journalist with this local news channel in Las Vegas. And he still works there as an investigative journalist there. And so he actually broke that story on the news channel. And I have been such a huge fan of George Knapp for decades. We're talking Skinwalker Ranch, Bob Lazar. These are things that I've read about when I was young, you know what I mean? And fascinated by for years. Now, I don't always believe everything, but fascinated, you know, by it. But he and Jeremy, over the last, I don't know, since maybe 2018, 2019, always seem to be in the right place at the right time to get these incredible stories or incredible footage. And that makes me not trust it as much. You know
Mm,
what I mean?
mm,
But that's not to say, like, because I watched video footage of I think he's a teenager, maybe he's 20 something, but he's posted a lot of stuff on his social media about this encounter, and he really seems genuine. You know, he
mm-hmm.
really seems genuine. And there's also rumors that there is footage of some of these aliens, but like, where is it? You know what I mean? Like, why? It's so, forget the whole George Knapp thing and forget the Jeremy Corbell thing. Let's just go into, this is such extraordinary claims. Where is the extraordinary evidence, which they say they have? You know what I mean? Like, that it should also be followed by that immediately. The only thing we've gotten is the 911 call and the police chest cam of seeing what looks to me like a meteor, you know, going by, which
Mm-hmm.
is cool and
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. It happens on the same night that this thing happens, you know, that's crazy. But so those are my running thoughts, and I guess I'll end it with, I really want to believe it. I really do.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know.
I'm hearing all this stuff out there in the last year or so that something's going down because the government's been releasing all this information that the UFOs exist and publicly
Sure.
discussing it, and
Well, they're not.
life for everyone on Earth will
They're
ever be changed.
they the government is doing more than they've ever done, but the last thing they have done is admit that they're real. That they actually haven't done that yet. Um, they've they're getting close to almost saying it by releasing some of this stuff that they're releasing, but they refuse to admit it. And that's been ultimately frustrating, you know, for me as a researcher and a writer. So I can't imagine, because there's tons of people that believe in disclosure and want disclosure to happen. And I can only imagine how insanely frustrating that must be for the disclosure people, you know.
Sure. I
Uh,
appreciate the fact that these former military people that were exposed to certain instances are coming out and saying it and
yeah.
publicly vocalizing what they experienced, which for me is something that I do believe. There's no reason
Oh,
for them
yeah.
to come out with that. It's almost like they want to say, here, it's true. They say it's not, but it happened to
Right.
me. And it's
Right.
kind of hard for you to dismiss that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Seeing a lot of these military guys and the credentials that they have and the backgrounds that they have, and some of the footage that has come forward from these guys, it's incredible stuff. And you're right, it's impossible to dismiss. And you know, I've been a believer, I think, since 4 years old. So this has been really uh, an amazing time to be a researcher
Yeah, I'll
by
bet.
having, yeah, by having so much of it in the mainstream.
Mm.
uh, but you know, with anything that does get put out into the mainstream, there will be people that will try to come out and take advantage of that, and that's where you also have to be I guess aware of your surroundings and understand the nuances in the different stories. Don't just read headlines, read the whole article. You know,
And not
if you're
only
just
that, the power of modern technology and all the things that they can do
right,
to
right.
Photoshop and create. I mean, I've seen some pretty crazy videos that have happened in the last few years where they've said, this is what this person said, and you see the actual footage and he didn't. And it's kind of like, okay, what's going on here? It's somebody that's really good at fixing things on video
Yeah.
footage. So,
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, and that's been happening since the inception of ufology with, you know, hoax videos and hoax
mm,
pictures, you know, started with hoax stories really, and then turned into hoax pictures, and now we're doing the hoax videos. And it's honestly not even hoaxing anymore with AI. It looks real and you don't know what is and what isn't. And,
yeah.
you know, what's interesting though, I guess if something is really clear, you can probably count on it being like AI or something. um, because even though we have like 4K phone cameras now, if you've ever tried to, you know, take a picture of the moon or just an airplane that's going over, even during the day, it's tough to get a clean, non-blurry or
hmm
non-pixelated picture of it, you know, when you're really zoomed in. It's really hard to do. So, you know, that's why I think some of the stuff that's coming out and you're seeing some of not the best type of quality, those are probably the ones you want to focus on a bit more. But the hoaxers are also know that, so they'll try to pixelate their
Right.
stuff and try to
Right.
hide effects. So it's all a
You know,
crapshoot.
I end up saying to people when they say something to me like, "Why should I believe you?" And I'm like, "I really don't care if you do or not. If I've experienced
That's where
something,
I'm at. Yeah,
that's my experience. I'm willing to share it with you. Take it for what it's worth. If you think
yeah,
it's entertainment, that's fine. I believe it happened to me. It happened to me. I experienced it. Whether you believe it or not, I really don't care."
yeah.
And that's kind of where I leave it.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with the experiencers that I interview. I've interviewed hundreds of people, and again, I don't believe everything, but 90% of the time, maybe 80, but a large percentage of the time, I believe that they believe it, and that's good enough for me. You know,
Right.
I want to believe a genuine experiencer as much as I can, and when I can interview them in person, that's one of my favorite things because I can really uh, look at their body language. I can hear the tone in their voice and see
Make your own
the look in their
interpretations.
eye. Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah. And but sometimes they don't want to, and I can only interview them over Messenger or something, and that's
Oh
fine
yeah.
too. But
Hmm.
so that's where you have to try to ask as many questions as possible, to the point of being annoying. but but what I've learned doing it over 20 years now is to be a kind, non-judgmental ear, and to treat those people with respect, because
With
it's all
respect.
about, yeah,
Sure.
it's all about the experiencer, and it's not for anybody else to decide what they went through. Just like a victim,
Exactly.
a victim of sexual assault or something, it's not up to
Hmm.
anybody else what happened to them and how they should feel. It's up to them. And
Yeah,
and
exactly.
what we are responsible for is our reaction to them. And I feel like it should be kind and
And in our
non-judgmental.
positions, we're there to acknowledge them and tell their story.
Yeah,
I deal with the same thing with the paranormal and ghost
sure.
stories when people are afraid that they're going to be ridiculed for opening up to me. And some of these people have never told their story and are coming and they're sharing it with me now. I want to give them that respect and say, look, I believe you, and we're sharing it with the world,
Yeah,
and it's okay.
yeah, yeah, I
So
completely agree.
you definitely are doing it the right way, because then it also helps people to feel comfortable and open up to you more. I mean, I did a chapter on near-death experiences, and I was kind of like a person, a friend on the page, the Facebook page. It's kind
Sure.
of like how I get a lot of people involved in chapters that I'm working on, and a lot of them were afraid to talk to an outsider. They were on this page because they wanted to share their experience with other near-death experiencers. So when this writer comes in and say, look, I'm writing about near-death experiences. If you'd like me to share your story, I'm open to listening. When they actually came out and shared their stories, it was the first time they'd ever spoken to an outsider. And it was such a profound and personal thing for them. And I feel this
Wow.
way with any kind of experience, a UFO encounter, and like you said, a sexual um, attack of some sort. It's the same thing. They are opening up to you. They don't want to be ridiculed. They're sharing their experience. And it is such a profound personal thing. I end up having lifelong friendships with these people now after
Yeah,
writing their stories.
yeah,
That, and I
that,
take it seriously. I really do. I
yeah.
take it personally and seriously.
Absolutely, and I feel that's the right way to do it too. I think, uh, especially in ufology, but it's also what I'm most experienced in. But I think ufologists or writers of UFO stories have done such a disservice over the years to experiencers, where they're just trying to get that nugget of a story and then get it out
Yeah.
there and then forget the experiencer. And
Yeah.
without naming names, there's just I've had some of the books in my library, and I those aren't books that I want to have anymore, and I don't, because it's about everything we've been talking about. Treating the experiencer with respect is what it comes down to, and kind of funny. With one of my books, Otherworldly Encounters, I kind of had the opposite issue that you were having with your book in paranormal stories and
Hmm.
UFO encrypted stuff. I had UFO stories, I'm like, oh, where can I fit in these really cool cryptid and some haunted stories that I have? Because
And
I
other
want.
strange phenomena chapter.
Well, instead of calling the book something with UFOs, it's called Otherworldly Encounters to try to,
There you go. See, you did the
encapsulate
same thing.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah,
funny,
yeah.
a funny
Because they're
parallel.
such good stories. They're so
Yeah,
good. And I mean, these stories were not, I mean, some of them went back to the 60s, sure, the 70s, which
yeah,
were great too. And I'm going to share them because they were great. But there were some that happened in 2019, 2020, and that's
right.
here, right
Mhm.
there.
Yeah,
And it happened, and I can't deny it. And these are personal friends of mine that are telling me the stories. I'm not gonna call them liar, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
actually, one of my friends said, "Please change my name. Don't let them know that I'm telling you the story," because she didn't want people to think she was crazy.
sure.
So, but it's definitely cool to hear about this stuff. And I always ask people like, "Well, what do you think? Is it from a different dimension? These cryptids, are they interdimensional? What?" Because it's so weird to have all of these encounters all around the world and say
Yeah,
that it doesn't happen.
right,
It,
right.
it, it just, I can't deny the fact that there has to be something. We just don't have a logical explanation for it yet.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, over the years, my opinion on what cryptids are have certainly changed as I've heard stories and talked to people and, seen all these different types of experiences. And for a while, or maybe when I was younger, before I was doing this professionally, I was convinced that Bigfoot, and Nessie and a chupacabra were all flesh and blood, undiscovered animals of some sort. And now
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure, hearing so many stories, especially a lot of Stan Gordon stories out of Pennsylvania, that have happened, where there's just all these stories with Bigfoot disappearing or being seen at the same time a UFO is
Yeah.
being seen. And
Yes.
these dogman stories, they seem to kind of shimmer in and out of existence. And black-eyed kid stories, like those are stories
Oh, those
that
are
still scare me.
creepy.
Yeah,
Oh my God. I know the
like
first time I heard about it, I was like, what? And
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
hearing things that I never even knew about. Like I had
yeah,
a certain range of things that I had heard about and grew up with and was
right,
interested in. Like you said, Nessie with
yeah,
Bigfoot. But then all of a sudden I'm hearing about all this other stuff I'd never even heard about. And then you hear
yeah,
these people telling you stories, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's a whole
yeah.
world of things I had no clue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's crazy stuff out there, and people are seeing and experiencing crazy things. And I think you had said something similar earlier, but not all of them are making it up. There's
Mm-hmm.
something's happening. I'm convinced
Mm-hmm.
of that. What it is, I don't know. Even with UFOs and extraterrestrials and all that stuff, they're probably interdimensional. Uh, you know, uh, I have no answers. The one thing, it's so weird. Like when you've done a job for so long, you feel like you become an expert at it. I've become dumber, I think, because I have way more questions than answers. You know what I mean? I've been doing it for
That's a
20
good
years now.
thing, though. That's a good
I
thing.
completely, yeah, completely agree. I love that I don't know. And I have no problem telling an experiencer that I don't know. I'm so glad you shared with me. I don't have any answers for you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But here's here's another experience that's similar to yours that somebody else had. See, you're not crazy. And
Right.
that's been really huge for
That
me.
actually is it definitely is. It definitely
Yeah.
makes a difference. And
Yeah.
you may not realize how huge that is, but it really does. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm really not alone.
Yeah.
And so if I'm crazy, then they're crazy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Either way is comforting. It's comforting not to be alone either way.
yeah.
So
What's
yeah,
your opinion
it's good.
of Project Blue Book? Because I had a civilian, Nick Frashy is his name. He's in his 80s. He's like 86, 87.
Oh wow.
And I interviewed him on his encounter at the Wanacue Dam back in the 60s. He was a police officer at the scene of that incident, and he had a questionnaire sent to him by Dr. Alan Hynek. It was this huge packet to complete, asking what he saw. The questionnaire even left a spot to draw a picture of the object if
Yeah.
he had seen it. And they ended Project Blue Book, I think it was like in 1970. But what is your opinion of that whole
Well,
department?
I've looked at a lot of Project Blue Book files, and I think the program was the people that were working on the program, like the Hyneks and Hyneks people that were immediately around him and with him and helping him with these investigations. I think they had the best of intentions. I mean, Project Blue Book is what turned Hynek into a believer. You know what I mean? As opposed to a
True.
non-believer. And he came into it as a skeptic. So I think they had the best of intentions. What Project Bluebird turned into was a disinformation campaign by the people above Hynek, you know, the people that are above the president, the people we don't see, and turning it into, see, we looked at 12,000 reports and only
And we
2% of
debunked
them.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only 2% of them were not sure, because there's not many reports that are finished or closed as unknown, you know. A lot of them have some sort of explanation. It's a weird explanation, meaning they saw Jupiter, they saw this, they saw, you know, anything that it's not a UFO. So I think it was a big disinformation campaign. But looking at hundreds of Project Blue Book files, and I'm only looking at the main ones because I'm working on my main books. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the state of Maine. So
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine California and all these other states that I haven't even looked at. But just looking at the main Project Blue Book files, there are so many little notes, off the cuff notes from this major or this general, like, you know, high ranking officials that are like, it'll say weird question mark, or it'll say, tell the witness they saw twinkling stars. You know, really interesting little side comments that you can look at and see that, okay, they kind of think a little bit more is happening, but we've got to close this because the overall agenda is to say UFOs don't exist.
Right.
Now you fast forward all the way to 2017, and Leslie Kean and Blumenthal, they get this huge article out in the New York Times, and it just throws a whole wrench, I think, into the government's you know, hiding UFOs plan. So they have to come out and be like, okay, we have been studying UFOs, we didn't stop with Project Blue Book, we have been studying them, and I guess we're going to continue to, because all this Navy stuff is coming out and everything. So I feel like there's a little bit of pulling teeth or wrenching of arms, saying we got to look into this, because I think the American people and people that are in places of government who have a belief in
They want to
other
know.
yeah, in otherworldly stuff, they are pushing their agenda a little
Mm-hmm.
harder. So there's a little bit more give and take now, which is great. But I don't care who's in charge in the White House. I don't think we're ever going to get the type of disclosure that people are looking for,
That we
unless
really
it's,
want.
yeah, unless it's some sort of crazy, and this is getting into conspiracy stuff, which I can have a real fun time going down a rabbit hole and thinking of all these things, you know, and having
Mm-hmm.
fun with it. But I don't necessarily believe them. But unless there's some sort of crazy, you know, UFO attack that they're going to plan, that is a fake invasion of some sort to distract us from A, B, or C, or, you know, whatever they don't want us to know about, you know, they've been talking about, they meaning conspiracy theorists have been talking about that since,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the 60s. But you know, and it hasn't happened yet, but it feels like if it's going to happen at any point in time, now is the time when it's so in the mainstream. And now there's a mainstream story about 8 and 10 foot tall aliens running around Las Vegas. It seems like
Yeah.
maybe we are inching towards
Mm.
some sort of planned fake invasion, or a real one. I don't know what.
I don't know how true it is or not, but I was heard it from somewhere that Hynek actually, had the book that he put out that debunked everything because that's what he was told to do. But he also kept
Right,
another journal that said this is what really happened. And I think they
right.
had actually even based a recent show or a documentary or something on that version of what he felt was real.
Yeah, and I believe it was, I always forget numbers, but you know, it's 2, 3, or like 5% of the original files. You know, he kept and had a big belief in, and continued to investigate on his own, which is really interesting. And
Yeah.
when you're looking at past Hynek quotes, sometimes you've got to know what year it came from, so you know what year he was in Project Blue Book. You know, if it was, you know, the first year or two, it's going to be more toting the government line. But as it gets later, closer to 69, he's
It's a
he's
different
singing.
tune.
Yeah, he's singing a
He's
different
talking a different
tune.
tune.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there are some horrible quotes out there from Hynek, and but you can dismiss them because that's when he was a skeptic too, and the government paid him to do a job, and the guy's a
He was
workaholic, and
doing what he was told.
and he was going to
Yeah.
do a good job, and he had no reason to believe that they were true, you know. So,
I gotta ask you. I gotta ask you this:
sure.
UFOs over Maine.
Yeah.
Who are the men in black?
I don't know. I have no idea.
No, huh?
No, there's two kind of generally accepted versions of what they might be, and it's kind of like the proto G-man type person, where it's a government official dressed in black, but it's clearly human, and they're like, "Shut up, don't talk about UFOs," and they're kind of just the government muscle, if you will. And
Big
then
bossy
there's yeah,
brute.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then there's the other side where it's clearly some sort of alien creature of some sort, but they're trying to mimic humanity, and they're wearing the black suits and the hats and sunglasses, whatever. But it's quite obvious if you were to encounter one that they aren't human, but they're still trying to manipulate you and scare you and intimidate you and things like that. So just generally speaking, I mean, that's what Men in Black are. There have been some Men in Black experiences in Maine, and one story I feel like it sounds like it's true, and another story I don't know if I buy it, and they're both from the 1970s, and they actually involve it's two different stories, but there's overlapping players in both stories. So in 1975, these two gentlemen who were living in like southern central Maine, they hear an explosion outside one night, and it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They both work the late shift, so they were up late. They hear this explosion. They go outside. They're like, "What the hell was that?" And they're not seeing anything. But then they start to feel weird. And one of the guys goes, "Hey, we should go for a ride." And the other guy's like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." Like randomly. It's not typically how they interact with each other, or is something they would do at that time of night. But they felt compelled to get in the car and drive. So now they're in the car and they're driving. And they claim while they're driving, some unseen force takes over the driving of the car, almost like Christine, from Stephen King, where the car starts driving on its own, and it takes them down to this pond. And now, and then the car stops, and while they're at this pond, a fog kind of envelops the pond and the car, and now all of a sudden there's a big bright light in the sky. And then the next thing they know, they're kind of sitting in the car and they're dazed, and it hurts to breathe, and their eyes hurt, and they're like, "What the hell is going on?" So they start up the car, it starts, they can drive it on their own again, and then something takes over driving the car again, and it takes them to another area, and then two more UFOs come out of nowhere and start chasing the car. So now they have control of the car again. It's a crazy story. Okay. And they finally get home, and they go to one of their parents' house. They're kind of young guys. They were like early 20s, and they were really scared. So they went to one of their parents' house and explained what happened. And the parents believed them. The boys were that shooken up that the parents believed them, and they could see that there was some sort of injury to like their face and eyes, and they still complained of not being able to breathe very well, and it hurt, and they almost were acting a bit
Hmm.
drunk, like they didn't have good balance and stuff. So they call the police, and the police is like, "Well, we don't know what the hell to do with that, so call this person." And the person they recommended was a woman named Shirley Fickett, who was investigating UFOs in the 1970s in Maine. And she took on the case, and she had other colleagues that she brought in. One of the colleagues was a gentleman named Herbert Hopkins, who was a doctor. And he was like a general practitioner, but he also had a hobby of otherworldly things. He was interested in paranormal things, and he really loved sci-fi pulp magazines. And he also studied for 5 years how to put people under hypnosis and for them to share their
Okay,
stories.
that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Mm.
Shirley had Herbert Hopkins talk to these guys. And actually, one of the guys got so scared he didn't want to do it anymore, and he ended up moving out of state. So they ended up only dealing with one of the guys. And through the hypnosis sessions, the gentleman who didn't leave the state, he was saying how he felt that he was abducted, and he remembered seeing aliens, and he described what they were wearing, and they had these weird robes, clothes that they were wearing, and they were tall, like 5, 6 feet, but had the big heads and the big black eyes. And so this was all coming out, and Herbert Hopkins was recording all of his hypnosis sessions. You fast forward about a year, and Herbert Hopkins gets a phone call one evening, and it's a gentleman who said he works for a UFO bureau out of New Jersey. Just kind of funny.
Mm.
And he asked Hopkins if he could come over and talk about the case that he was working on, with this guy that he's been hypnotizing. And Hopkins is like, sure. Yeah, come on over. I'll go turn the porch light on. And, he figured the guy might be there in a half hour, something like that. So he goes and turns on the porch light. And as he's turning on the porch light, there's somebody walking up his steps.
Oh,
And he's like,
shit.
yeah. And he's like, what the hell?
Oh, my God.
And so they knock on the door. He opens the door and he's like, I'm here to discuss the case. And Hopkins kind of is sort of entranced by this guy. And he's like, sure, come on in. Doesn't even ask him his name, just lets him in the house. And this was 1975. So
Mm-hmm.
he either had to have been calling from some sort of building or payphone. And Hopkins knew there was no payphone anywhere near for that guy to get there so quickly. So he didn't understand how he called and got there so quickly.
He did,
So
yeah.
he's thinking about this while this guy's kind of walking in, but he also can't do anything about it. It's almost like Jedi mind tricks on him. But he's aware of what's happening though. So the guy comes in and he sits down. He's like, "You've been talking to this guy, and long story short, we don't want you to do that anymore. So you're going to destroy everything that you have right now."
Ah.
And he goes, also, you have 2 coins in your pocket. Pull out one of them. And Hopkins is like, huh, puts his hand in his pocket. He feels 2 coins. He's like, okay. He pulls out one of them, and I think it was a penny. And the man in black goes, watch the penny. So Hopkins is watching the penny in his hand, and it starts to get blurry. And he's like, what the hell? And he's looking at the penny, and then it disappears. And he's like, do you know who Barney Hill is? And Hopkins goes, yeah, because that was a huge story, obviously. Plus being in New England, it was huge.
It took place over there.
Yeah. So Hopkins is like, yeah, I know Barney Hill. He's like, what happened to that penny happened to Barney Hill's heart. That's how he died.
Ooh.
So if you don't listen to what I'm saying, that's going to happen to your heart.
Great.
And Hopkins is like, yeah. So Hopkins is like, okay. And the guy goes, I'm running low. I must go now. And he started speaking more robotically. And then he started walking really slow. And then he started, Hopkins like opened the door for him. And he started going down the stairs, and he was taking like one step at a time, puts one foot down, then the other foot next to it, does that the whole time. Yeah. And walking very slow, almost elderly, if you will. And he starts going into the driveway, but there's no car there or anything. So Hopkins is like,
where's he going?
Yeah, where's he going? So he runs to the kitchen window so he can see, like, have a better view of the driveway. And the guy's not there, but he saw like this little flash of light, sort of. He thinks he almost saw it, like he's not sure, but something happened, and the guy's no longer there. And he's like, what the hell? So this whole time, like, Hopkins is married and he has kids. They're adult kids, but they actually are all at a movie while this is happening. Okay. So the guy leaves, and Hopkins goes into his office. He destroys everything. Okay.
He did.
Yeah. He was so scared. He destroyed everything. And when his family came home, when his family came home, he was sitting at the table, and he had a lot of that stuff there that was destroyed. And he also had a gun with him because he was scared that the person might come back. So he's sitting there and he just looks terrified, and his family's like, what the hell's going on? And he tells them everything, and they believe him. And his wife goes, when we were at the movies, we saw a UFO, and the movie place was like 20 minutes away from where they were. And so, that as a researcher, that makes me think, like, am I putting two and two together here? Where was his family being monitored while he was being visited?
Or was that
the thing? Right.
They're large enough that they could see it 20 minutes away. Oh, wow.
Right,
what a story.
Right. Yeah. And so that's how they kind of overlap. And again, that was just the real brief, dirty version of it. Like, it gets into a ton of detail, but fascinating stuff that's happened in the state of Maine, Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is really, really cool. Huh. Well, even one of the stories in that book is about 4 men being abducted from their canoe, right?
Yeah.
That must have been really strange too.
Absolutely. And that was a huge story as well. Those guys were featured on Unsolved Mysteries when that was originally on. They actually went on the Joan Rivers show when she had a talk show. So that kind of hit national news, like Travis Walton. And, it wasn't as big as Betty and Barney Hill, but it is another huge New England story, of alien abduction, and that happened.
So what you were saying is that this man in black was implying that Barney was killed, that he didn't just die, that he was talking too much, and they shut him up.
Right. And I don't recall reading anything to see if Betty felt the same way. I don't think that's a thing that is talked about anymore.
I'm pretty sure she went on to talk about it all the time, about the UFO encounter, what happened to him. She never shut up about it, but
and she was fine. Right. So I feel that was, I
don't know what the difference was between her or her husband. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Other than that was the Man in Black's way of using something to his advantage that didn't really happen. You know what I mean? But a scare tactic, if you will. But the 4 guys that were abducted in the mid-70s, that happened in the Allagash Wilderness Waterway, and it was 4 friends, but 2 of them are twin brothers, and they were actually students down in Massachusetts, and they decided to come to Maine on their school break to, kind of hike and canoe and fish and do all that stuff for like 11 days. They planned to like be up here and do all that stuff. And the first few days were fine. They were having a good time. It wasn't until, oh boy, been a while since I've looked into this story, but it was either 2 or 4 days into their trip where they were at this body of water that had a little shore, and there was a lot of people there. There were people having barbecues and all this stuff. And while they were there and kind of setting up their camp for the night, a bright light just kind of appeared, and everybody there saw it. And it was weird. And a lot of people looked at it and saw it, and nobody was really talking about UFOs. They're just like, what the hell's that? And after just not very long, it kind of blinked out. And that was really it. So it wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't until like the next night or 2 nights later where the 4 guys, they were running low on fish. They were having a hard time catching fish. So they attempted during the day, and they came back empty-handed. So that night, they're finishing basically the rest of their fish. So they don't have any more protein, and that's not good if you're hiking and being out in the sun all the time, and and they still have another week. So they're like, oh, we need something more than just like chips. You know what I mean? We got to catch some freaking fish. So they go, well, let's give it a try at night. There'll be less people on the water. Maybe we'll have some luck at night. So they all agree to this, but it's up in northern Maine, or really in Maine, almost anywhere, besides southern Maine. At nighttime, when it's dark and there's no lights, you can't see anything. It's just so dark, unless the moon's out. So the guys were kind of like getting the boat ready and everything. They're like, we're not going to be able to see a goddamn thing. You know, we're not going to know how to get back. So
Mm-hmm.
before they left, they decided to build this big bonfire on the shore because they planned on being out there for a few hours. And so they had to build a fire big enough that wouldn't burn out before they got back. So
Mm-hmm.
they built a bonfire, and they did that by grabbing big limbs of branches and other downed wood that was in the area. But they said they were grabbing big stuff, 6, 8, 10 inches around, small logs, if you will, to put on this bonfire. They start the fire. It's raging. It's this huge fire. They're now out in the boat and they're looking back at it. And even one of the guys was kind of nagging on all of them, like, guys, this is too big. We're going to start a forest fire. And they kept telling them to shut up about it, like it's going to be fine because it was on the shore near the water. Anyways, so now they're out in the canoe and they've been out there for a while. They're not having a whole lot of luck. And then that light comes back and it's right above them. And but it's above them but behind him a little bit, and one guy kind of felt like he was being watched, so he turned around and he sees the light and he's like, guys, what the hell is that? That's not the moon. So they all kind of turn and look at it and they're like, yeah, what is that? That's really weird. And then the next thing they know, they're back at the shore. The bonfire is now down to embers. 3 of the guys are standing on shore, and one of the guys is in the canoe that's kind of pulled up on shore a little bit, but he's still sitting in the canoe. And they're all like, what just happened? Were we just on the water? And they were so tired and they were so exhausted by whatever just happened that they went and sat at the picnic table, and they were thinking that they were going to try to eat something, but they all kind of just fell asleep. They wake up in the morning, and the rest of their trip, they kind of go through it like zombies. They're kind of just going through the motions. It's not this big exciting thing anymore. It wouldn't be until years later where one of the guys, he was one of the twin brothers, started having these really weird dreams. And in the dreams, he's surrounded by these creatures and they're looking down at him and he's laying down looking up at them. And he would wake up in a puddle of sweat and it was terrifying to him. And he's like, why am I having these crazy effing dreams? This is nuts. So he starts talking to his therapist about it. And his therapist recommends that he talk to this UFO guy. And that UFO guy turned out to be this gentleman named Raymond Fowler. Raymond Fowler is another legend in the ufology who has written a plethora of books, done a ton of investigations on people that have been abducted. And Ray Fowler found the story interesting enough to kind of follow up with the guys, interview them all, and then he gets to a point where he can get them all hypnotized and try to get what happened to them between seeing
piece it together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so this was like years long process. That's not like it just came out just like that, it was a years long process, and they pieced it all together, and it turns out it's very similar abduction scenario like Betty and Barney Hill went through. They were brought up into the spaceship. They were all examined, semen and blood and nails and hair samples and all this stuff. But the focus, and the beings were speaking to them telepathically, the focus was really the 2 twin brothers, and the aliens were trying to figure out that whole thing and why that's a thing with humanity, which is interesting because, it's terrible to say, but, for us, I'm sure all aliens look alike to us, you know what I mean? But they think twins within us is really interesting, at least that's their story. But again, that's a real dirty, quick version of the Allagash 4 story. But these 4 guys were abducted, and years later, they all go under hypnosis. They all have this same story because they were all hypnotized separately on different nights, on different months, in different years. And they all had a very similar story. They remember seeing each other while they were there, and this person was doing this. And the person being hypnotized is looking at one of the guys who had been hypnotized before, and they're confirming their stories under hypnosis, which is really interesting. I saw him doing this.
Tom Warner has said from the Berkshires, he says that he and there was a female that they had recollection of seeing each other too. So that was very interesting.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Very
Do
interesting
you
stuff.
think
And
do you think that there are alien human babies?
boy, I don't know. There's a gentleman who has since become a really close friend, somebody that is an experiencer, and I ended up telling their story in one of my books. Actually, the whole book is about him. It's a book called Granite Skies, and it's about this guy
Yes, I
named Mike
saw that one.
Stevens. Yeah,
Okay, that's about him. Okay.
yeah, and he's had a lifetime of encounters. So while the whole book is about him, it's 30 or 40 different encounters he's had throughout his life since he was like 2 or 3 years old. But one of the experiences that he had, well, I guess let me first answer this. Alien human hybrid babies for a long time was a ridiculous concept to me. I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I never researched it. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. Um, Maybe I'll look into that someday. That day came when Mike told me that he had gone outside to have a cigarette and he got this weird message kind of like beamed down to him, and
Hmm.
kind of like implanted in his head that he has a child out there.
Mm.
And it was so impactful to him. And you typically hear that with women, not so much with men. And it was so impactful to him that when he came inside, he was crying. It was such a deep feeling of this is the truth. I was just told this, and I can't believe I have an entity out there that's part of me. And when he told me that, and the sincerity in which he told it to me, and me having no reason to doubt him in any way, it kind of changed my tune about alien human hybrids and all that stuff. I'm still on the fence with it, but I don't think it's ridiculous anymore. Um, it's all about paying attention and listening. And I was doing that with Mike, and I was showing him kindness, and I was non-judgmental, and he influenced how I think about that. And
There must
I
be
think
some
it's really
reason
cool.
for it too. There must be some
Yeah,
reason for it too. Why
absolutely.
why why they do it? I'm not sure what it is, but
I don't know. I don't know if it's experiments or if this is a type of species that's dying and this is how they're saving themselves. I don't know. Because he had a lot of benevolent encounters, which is really cool. He also had some really shitty ones. and
oh
and stuff
really?
that, yeah, and stuff that really scared him. But he had a lot of benevolent ones too, which is really cool. And if he was helping them out in some way, that's cool with him. Like that's definitely cool. It certainly has fucked up his life here and there. He's had a rough go of it, but as of late he's doing a whole lot better
Oh,
dealing
that's
dealing
good.
with it. Yeah, 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 yeah. So it's been interesting to watch his progress. It's been really cool. you know
And
and
that's
he's really,
cool that you're able to watch that journey is cool
yeah.
too.
And honestly, I was I was on his journey. It's interesting, how this was the most interesting book I had ever written, because I was it felt like I was right there with him. It's almost like we went to war together, and that's not to diminish people who have actually fought in
Oh
war.
no, I understand. It's just that
Yeah,
feeling, that
yeah,
emotion,
yeah.
that connection.
The
Sure,
camaraderie, and
sure.
and we don't see each other often. He lives like 4 or 5 hours away from me, and we don't talk as often as we'd like. But he's someone that turned into like a blood brother. You know what I mean? Because we kind of went through this agonizing experience together, because he had to relive all that, telling it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had my own experiences, and so in Granite Skies, there's Mike's general story of all of his crazy encounters. On top of that, there's a story of a man who has been struggling almost to the point of suicide. And then a smaller layer on top of that is my backstory and how it kind of fits into this whole narrative. And then how, in the end, it's really a story of hope, and I struggle with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation. Like, to this day, I still struggle with it. And my catalyst wasn't extraterrestrials, but for Mike, it was. And it doesn't matter what the catalyst is, we're still feeling those feelings of anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation, regardless of the catalyst. So we kind of bonded over that, you know,
Oh,
and
interesting.
we turned in, it's turned into this feeling of hope. And you know what, we're going to be okay. Forget, you know, like we can't let it, we can't let it own us and control us. And some days it does and it wins, and that sucks.
Can't let us
But
end it. We can't let it end us either.
yeah, that's the big thing, because it will control us some days, and it
Mm,
will put us, you know, make us feel things we don't want to feel as much as we
mm-hmm.
try to take ourselves out of it. But as long as it doesn't end us, I think we're going to be okay. You know what I mean?
Right.
And for somebody
I
like
love
Mike,
that.
yeah, and for somebody like Mike, for his catalyst to be something so friggin' strange, you know, and to be able to come out and say that, and on top of it that he struggles with anxiety and depression, because people with anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation, for years, you know, mental health and mental illness has been laughed at and poked fun at, just like experiencers. And now Mike is both of them, you know. That
Right.
really sucks, but I'm really glad we're kind of living in now where it's not such a stigma. And even if it is a stigma to people who don't get it, at least he's one of those people that doesn't feel alone anymore.
Right.
And I'm someone that doesn't feel alone anymore. And again, our
Glad you
catalysts
found
are
each
different.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so
It happen. Everything
it's
happens for
really
a
cool.
reason, though.
Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason. You are meant to
Yeah.
meet and tell his story and make that
Right.
connection. So I don't
Right.
believe in coincidences. I really don't.
Yeah,
So
I'm kind of with you on that. And there was even a crazy story with how the book got published. And we kept saying during that process, because I kept him apprised of everything, you know. I wanted him with me, just like he took me with him on his
mm-hmm.
terrestrial journey. I was taking him on the journey of behind the scenes and what was going on, just to get the book out.
Sure.
And you know, so there was some craziness in the background to get the book out. And we kept, a common thing we kept saying to each other is, things are happening for a reason. Let's just let it do its
Let
thing.
it go. Let it
Yeah,
be. Yeah.
and
Let
we
it
did.
happen.
And it came out, which is great, you know. So
When did that come out? What year was that?
uh 2020, and it was like
Oh, okay.
right at the start of the pandemic. It was like the worst time to release a book, but also the best time, but we didn't know it was the best time
Also,
yet.
I know. Same thing. I mean, I was sequestered in my house for all that time, and I just kept writing and writing and writing. So I ended up getting a whole
Right,
other book out during the pandemic. So where other people were like,
right.
I got to get out. I'm sick and tired of being it. I was in my happy place. I was just not letting it
Yeah.
get to me, and I was just sitting at my computer and just doing my thing, you know. So, wow, I'm so happy for you that you were there for him and that you have found that relationship. That's great.
Yeah, and him being there for me, and we still are. You know, when we do call, be like, you know, like if I'm having such a hard time and I can't, for some reason, don't feel like I can reach out to my partner, or you know, something like that, he's
Mm-hmm.
always the person I can call. Just like if I see his number and it's ringing, it's not just a text message, like it's his
Mm-hmm.
name coming up as a phone call, I know that I should answer it. You know, he's not just being like, "Hey, how you doing?" It's something's
Right.
going on.
If there's
You
a
know.
reason. There's a
Yeah,
reason.
yeah, yeah. We text if it's just like, "Hey, what's going on? How you doing?" You know what
Right.
I mean?
A
So
phone call is a whole other thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Sure, yeah.
Um, Otherworldly encounters. What do you make of crop circles?
I think crop circles are really interesting. I'm so sorry, I don't have good answers because I don't know what to think of them. And my
I want
thinking
to know your
has
take.
uh, my it's another thing where my thoughts have evolved over time. I think for a long time I was convinced they were made by aliens or UFOs or something. And then I that was something I did decide to like jump into and research and really try and you know, not figure out, but I wanted to know the stories, not just
Hmm.
see the picture. And there are some pictures which do look pretty good that are made by humans. That's just a fact, you know. It's when you test the crops in those crop circles that are human made where they differ from other crop circles that are not made by humans. And that's also another fact. And you can't not see that, you know. When these crops are being sent out to test facilities, it's not just Joe Blow who believes in crop circles is at home and doing a little test. They're like, oh yep, see that they're sending them out to facilities to have them
Right.
tested, and they're coming back with anomalous findings. And that's friggin' weird.
Mm.
And when you test stuff from the human made
Yeah.
ones, they're not having those things. And also the crops, just from a visual standpoint, if you're standing inside a human one as opposed to a whatever one, the human one, the crops are broken. In the other one, they're not broken. They're laid down really nicely and they're not broken. Visually, there is some weird stuff happening that's happened inside of them, like they've been cooked or boiled or something,
Something.
but that's like internal. So I don't know what to make of them. I don't know what they are. It's probably some sort of interdimensional travel system or something. I have no idea, but it's fascinating.
Mm. And I won't keep you too much longer, but I do want to ask you,
yeah.
what is extraterrestrial biological entity? What is meant
Well,
by that?
that is just a long form name for an alien.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
That's
like
really
a
all it is.
prescription, the name of a prescription.
Yeah.
Why don't you just call it what it is? Why do you have to call it like something ridiculous?
Right. The shortened version of it is EBE. So if you hear people in an interview saying EBE, that's what they're talking about. But it's become so mainstream now, people are just saying aliens or extraterrestrials. People know what they mean by that now. So it's kind of an old phrase, if you will.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's something I didn't know. Well, why don't you tell the audience how they can find all of your wonderful books and tell them about your podcast, I Want to Believe.
Oh, sure. So, my podcast, it's called I Want to Believe, and it's me and my best buddy, and we cover a range of paranormal topics. So we're telling black-eyed kid stories, UFO stories, ghost stories, dogman stories, Sasquatch, a bunch of different stuff. And you can find that literally wherever you get your podcasts. So it's on Apple and Google and Spotify and all that good stuff. And we're on season 6 right now. So we've been doing it for a little while, and it's a good time. Check it out. You can just do a Google search for I Want to Believe and Nomar Slevik, and it'll come right up, or do a search for it on your podcast app. To find my books, you can literally Google Nomar Slevik books, and it's going to come right up because my name is pretty unique. It comes up pretty easily. But the actual website for my online store is slevikstore.company.site, and that's where you are getting the books directly from me. I sign everything, I package it up myself, and I send it to you. If you buy it anywhere else, I still get the money for it, but you're not getting the homemade
autographed
service.
copy.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. But you can also get them on Amazon and a lot of other places you get books. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you coming on with me tonight.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to listeners, if you liked listening to this week's episode and you're into all things paranormal, check out my other show, Eleanor Wagner's Creepin' It Real, podcast out of the Coast to Coast Entertainment Network, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. And if any of you are interested in reading any of my books, you can find the links to them on my website, authoreleanorwagner.com. I write about the history of the town and location, add the paranormal story to the mix, and finish it all off with photos and evidence. Everybody loves a good ghost story, but there's nothing better than a true ghost story. So check it out, authoreleanorwagner.com. Thank you.